Welcome to the Dire Wolf Show, where we believe that America is exceptional and that our constitutional rights should never be infringed. I am Dire Wolf. On our show, we bring you the truth and debunk fake news. If you love laughing at the insanity of the regressive left, sit back and relax. Boy, do I have a show for you. Welcome back, Wolfpack. Dire Wolf here for another Dire Discusses. Behind enemy lines on YouTube, where speech is not free and the truth is demonetized. For now, if you guys all head over to D Live, we can stop being on YouTube. Along with me is my co-host, Fox-a-lot. Sorry, Fox Trevize.
Oh my God, we got you stuck on the. It took so long to train you on the new name.
Bad Dire.
And then we just finished stuffing those things back in the closet, and you want to pull them back out already. I am, other than being dead named, I am doing just fine.
Sorry about that.
That
but
is all right.
Today's topic is going to be Puerto Rico.
But
Puerto Rico?
Yeah, but do you think that the video we were just watching on Twitter? Do you think that's funny? Do you think we should break that down for the fans real quick?
Oh yeah, that's a really important video for it's an impeachment update.
Yeah, it's the only it's one of the only two things that were important about impeachment. The other being that apparently the only drink you're allowed to have is water and milk, but the only food you're allowed to have is Hershey's chocolate. Somehow Hershey's got the unanimous monopoly on food in the Senate, and you can only have Hershey's.
So
yeah,
Hershey's is sponsoring impeachment.
Technically not. So the senator from Pennsylvania, he must have done something to get Hershey in there. But his desk is apparently the candy desk, and it's full of candy. And he's on the Republican side, but the Democrats are more than welcome to cross the aisle should they want some chocolate. It is the only bipartisan thing in the entire process is that candy drawer.
Wow. That is strange.
Yes.
So let's pull up this video.
Alrighty. Let's see which we do. There we go.
This is pretty freaking creepy, to be honest with you.
Yeah, so it's a little low resolution even on Twitter, but we'll see if we can see what we can see here. All right, so we got Chuck Schumer here. I know it's a little blurry, but it's been multiple confirmations that this is indeed Chuck Schumer.
He just wiped his hand on that lady's back for some reason. Oh, look at that! He's telling someone to get out of his chair. There's no one there.
What was that?
What the hell was that?
Let's watch that again.
Trevor says he can't see the video.
Oh no. Well, that's because I'm awful at my job. Let's definitely watch that again.
I didn't say it.
Trevor implied it.
He's gesturing as though he's telling someone to get out of his chair. Now, it's very possible from a different angle he's talking to someone further up, but it really looks like he's talking to the chair, like he's shooing a dog off of it.
Yeah, this is the thing. It was good to really zoom in and watch it. So he takes his hand. He even nods with his head. He's got a full body gesture. Now, I grew up with cats, and I can imagine myself doing a similar thing if I walk into a room and I got a cat sitting on a chair, and it's all right, I want to sit down. So you look at it and you kind of wave it off with your hand like he does. That's exactly the kind of So I would just be yeah, get off. You know what you're doing. Get out of my chair. And Dire, you've got dogs. I mean, imagine you've done the same thing with them. And you're you know you're not supposed to be in there. Get off my chair. You just kind of wave them off, and then you sit down. It's just fucking so cat. Except for there's nothing there. So yes, the two most important, really not even just the most important, the only impeachment updates that are noteworthy is one, apparently Hershey's chocolate is allowed in the Senate, and that's the only food you're allowed to have, and two, there's ghosts.
Yeah, apparently.
Chuck Schumer can see.
I'll bet you,
people.
Chuck Schumer is so close to death that he can actually see dead people.
I think he was waving off the ghosts of the Democratic Party he helped kill.
Yeah, possibly some of the the founding fathers that are watching in horror.
Yeah, so they're rolling over in their grave.
Yeah. So everything in impeachment so far has been just a rehashing of everything we've already talked to you about. So there's literally nothing new to say.
Well, actually, the only thing that they that is sort of new is that it's the same thing that the Democrats always do. Everything that's old is new again. So they're actually some of their arguments now are actually circling back to the original arguments of Russian collusion and just like various other things that were debunked during the House hearings. It's like we already went through that. Why are you bringing that back up? That doesn't lend any credence to your point.
It actually makes the rest of your argument seem worse.
Yeah, so we had a shift today. Who basically said, yeah, this is too important to let the courts handle it. It's too important to let the voters handle it. If you don't give Schiff ultimate power, we must dissolve the Senate. Give Schiff ultimate power, and he will take care of us all. He promises.
Yeah. So one half of one branch of government thinks it has the right to rule over all the other parts of government.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
Yeah, he represents a sixth of the government, barely.
And only half of them, really, a little over half of that house.
Yeah.
So,
Jeez.
yeah.
Alrighty. Well, we will hopefully. I don't know. There's a vote on my Twitter. If you guys want us to actually go through impeachment on Saturday, right now, you guys rather drinking bleach or firing me is beating talking about impeachment. So we'll see. We'll see on Saturday whether or not I get fired or we talk about impeachment. Or maybe one of us has to drink bleach. I don't know. But you guys can decide that on Twitter if you would like to put your 2 cents in.
Yep.
Anyways.
So, hey, Puerto Rico.
Yes.
So there's a lot of recent news, and we're going to get into that. But before we do like what the current controversy is about Puerto Rico, it really would be important to understand the historical context that this is happening in. So we're going to start off with a little bit about Puerto Rico's history with the U.S. and corruption and all that stuff, and then we'll go into the current issues they're dealing with.
Yep. Alrighty. So I have a map up here, which is you can see you got the United States over here, just lovely little place. And you zoom in under Florida. You got
my house.
What's that?
I can see my house from here.
Oh yeah. You got Florida, which you got Cuba a little bit underneath there. Then you got Dominican Republic, and then off to the side you've got Puerto Rico. There you go, cute little island. Awesome. Oh, and then the U.S. Virgin Islands. Awesome. They're very, very nice. All right, so Puerto Rico's history. So yeah, Dyer said we're gonna do a quick rundown of kind of like what was like the last like 500 years that like brought them to now. We're gonna try and rush through that though, because what's happening now is a lot more important. But it is nice to get a little bit of the historical context. We've talked about that on the show before. That the your more traditional mainstream media that actually has the resources to go out and do this historical research doesn't do the historical research, never gives you historical context. So Dyer and I tried to rectify that by at least doing our best attempt at giving some historical context as to why we're here now. Because mainstream media, if it wasn't something the Republicans did or it happened further back in time than 3 minutes ago, they don't want to talk about it. So back in 1493, Columbus, after he sailed the ocean blue, he found Puerto Rico. And the island quickly gained strategic importance for Spain based on its location on a lot of trade routes, either going to South America or North America. This played a major role in its development over the centuries as a major port destination in the Caribbean. Throughout the 1800s, Spain did its best to maintain control of the colony, but lost it to the U.S. in the Spanish-American War in 1897 because Spain thought they were cool and America showed them that they were not.
So after getting control, the U.S. gave Puerto Rico a bicameral legislature, which, by the way, bicameral is to have two chambers. So kind of like our Congress has two chambers, sort of.
Yep.
So with half elected by the people and half appointed by the U.S. The U.S. also appointed the governor. The legislature that locals got to vote on had very broad powers, but the U.S. Congress reserved the right to undo anything they thought was out of hand. So basically, they were a puppet state of the U.S. We also granted automatic U.S. citizenship to Puerto Rican born after our acquisition of the government.
Yeah, and it's the idea of them being kind of a puppet during that time. That's kind of what a lot of the I don't necessarily want to say it's like propagandist type talk, but the a lot of the like people in they talk about like colonialism and like decolonizing stuff like that. That's kind of how they present the history is that America was puppeteering Puerto Rico from the very beginning, but realistically they've been a colony. They weren't set up to be independent. If we had just granted them immediate independence, they would have just dissolved themselves. They would not have been able. They were not ready for that at all. This is during the time that we were still doing a little bit of imperialism, still going out and colonizing to an extent. I mean, as late or beginning of the 1900s, that's about to wrap up. We're close. We're close in that time, but it would have been much more irresponsible to just toss onto them complete self-rule and say, good luck, I hope you guys don't sink your island. That would have been probably far more of a disaster than keeping a very close eye on them and appointing certain people to help them out.
I don't have a problem with any government having territories or protectorates, right?
Yeah.
It's not like they are trying to rise up and throw off the U.S. government. They've benefited from it, and that's why they actually the U.S. government gives them a lot of money and a lot of aid to make them happy, and they like getting all that money, and that's why they aren't upset with being part of the United States. Plus, they like the citizenship. So if it's not like we are oppressing the people of Puerto Rico.
Yeah, exactly. And
I'm saying that they are a puppet government. I'm saying that their government could not operate on its own and did have final direction by the federal government in the U.S.
Yeah. We'll see once we granted them a lot more authority for self-rule. We can see how they almost immediately screwed that up, but we'll get into that in a second here. All right, so the next part we got, let's see here. So almost right away, we can see parallels with modern times after we acquired them in the 1900s or late 1800s. A series of natural disasters, including earthquakes and hurricanes, impoverished the island over the first few decades of U.S. rule. This was followed by the Great Depression in the 30s that further exacerbated the situation. Internal debate among Puerto Rico's political parties leads to protests against U.S. rule. This led to many protesters being shot by Puerto Rico's own police forces. Those were not police directed by the U.S., and the U.S., in fact, was very unhappy about that and launched a series of investigations to figure out why they were killing each other over this issue that they had.
Well, it's partly because those in power benefited from the U.S., being part of the U.S. government or being run by it, right? So they don't want to give up that power. So they saw people that were campaigning for independence as being at risk of taking away all their money and influence because they would immediately lose their jobs since they were appointed by the U.S. But they lost it anyways because of what happened next. So in 1947, the U.S. granted Puerto Rico the right to elect their own governor. It was likely that someone in the U.S. said, I immediately regret my decision. That's probably what happened because within a year, Puerto Rico's new popularly elected government made it illegal to display a Puerto Rican flag, to sing pro-independence tunes, or to talk about independence, or to campaign for independence. Jeez Louise. This was specifically to target the minority parties that wanted Puerto Rico to be independent.
That's really, really great job, guys. Doing a heckin' democracy right there.
It's funny that we removed leadership, or direct influence over their leadership, and they immediately oppressed their own people.
Yeah.
To stay part of the U.S.
Yeah,
for
really,
the same
really.
reasons I just talked about.
Yeah, really, really A plus. They it took another 10 years after this. It was 1947. It took till 1957 before they were able to repeal that law that made it illegal for like the minority. Basically, what they did is they outlawed the primary position of the minority party at the time. It just so happened that when the U.S. granted them the power to elect their government, that they had the majority party just had a real small majority, but they almost immediately made it illegal for the minority party to even have their basic positions. It'd be like if when the Republicans sweep. Actually, it'd be much more likely that if had and when in 2018 when the Democrats swept the House, it would be as if they made it illegal for Republicans to talk about conservatism. Like that's
Yeah.
basically what happened.
But this in 1947, the passing of these laws is kind of like showing the seeds of the reason why the people why they want to be a part of the U.S. government, why they don't want independence right now. The same kind of mindset exists then as it does now. Is they benefit so much financially. The people in government, not the people. Like the people in government, they benefit so financially so much, and they get so much power because of Puerto Rico as part of the U.S. government that they would never want to give it up.
Yep. And so, they eventually had to roll that back because it came. There was somebody from the minority party was they brought it up to a U.S. Court case, and they basically decided, okay, well, we're a protector to the U.S. and the Constitution doesn't like specifically apply, but it mostly applies, and this law is just really not in the spirit of the First Amendment, obviously outlawing political speech. So they ended up rolling that back. But during that time, Puerto Rican nationalists had attempted to assassinate U.S. President Truman, and they also carried out a lot of other operations in the U.S. with the intent of overthrowing our government. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks.
We appreciate it.
Why don't you focus on, like, if you don't like your government, overthrow your government? Why are you trying to overthrow mainland U.S.? It doesn't make any sense. It seems like way more steps to changing your government.
Also, look how big they are compared to us. Like, I mean, just focus on yourself, guys. Come
Yes.
on.
So, despite this, in 1950, the U.S. offered them the option to become a Commonwealth of the U.S. They accepted this and became a Commonwealth under the U.S. in 1952. A Commonwealth basically means they are a state, but also that they aren't. There are a lot of very small differences, but the big one is not having members in Congress and voting for the U.S. president. So they don't really get to have a say in our laws, essentially. Over the next few decades, the U.S. guided their economy to become more industrial, and the island became a major tourist destination for Americans.
Then in 2012, Puerto Rico held a referendum to modify their status as a Commonwealth. They've had many of these referendums before 2012. We'll get into why 2012 was important. But basically, the U.S., we've been rather lenient stewards with them, especially if you compare us to how other countries have treated their protectorates and their territories over the last century. We're very, very kind and generous to ours. So we left it almost basically permanently open that after they became a Commonwealth, at any time they had the option to modify that. They could apply to become a state, or they could apply for independence. There was any number of things that they could do if they wanted to get out of this Commonwealth deal. We weren't trapping them in it. It was totally up to them. So they'd had multiple referendums in the past. Not all of them ended up saying, okay, we want to stay a Commonwealth. We don't want to do any of these other things because we don't know what would happen. But in 2012, the vote came out in favor of changing their status away from a Commonwealth, and the secondary kind of not really a vote, but it was a poll that was also on the ballot. So basically, the ballot was: would you like to, yes or no? Do you want to change the Commonwealth status? And then the next question didn't really count for anything. It was just a poll to see what you would want Puerto Rico to become. And most of the people who said that they wanted to leave, I think it was like 56% of the vote, so that they wanted to change the status of Commonwealth. And then of those people, most of them said that they wanted to become a state. And so that seemed to be, and I remember at the time, I was in college, and everybody was like, oh my God, we're going to have a 51st state. That's going to be nuts. And so at the time, everybody thought that was what was going to happen. But they passed that, and then they made the appeal to U.S. Congress, and U.S. Congress ended up ignoring it because there was a lot of uncertainty as to the integrity of their election that they had, the integrity of the vote. There was a lot of weird stuff that went on with the ballots. There was 500,000 ballots that had just the yes that they wanted to change their Commonwealth status circled, but they didn't answer any of the other questions that were on the ballot. So it seemed weird, and those were found. I think they were found like all at the same time or something. It was a very strange circumstance. So while technically they did vote to change their status, the U.S. Congress in 2012 decided to ignore it, and I believe every year since they just keep voting to table that issue. So technically, at any time, Puerto Rico, there's like an open bill on the table that Puerto Rico could become a state, just on any whim of like Nancy Pelosi or whoever's the Speaker of the House. But that just keeps getting kicked down the road because the referendum just wasn't trusted by the U.S.
Yeah, don't want to actually do that though, because once you become a state, then now you're responsible for paying taxes, and you're responsible for following a lot of laws that don't apply to a commonwealth.
Yeah.
Which are all mostly the financial ones, where the government then has to start paying for a lot of stuff that they wouldn't have to before. Instead of getting paid money to be a commonwealth, which are just gobs of money thrown at them every year just to not run away from our country. So the two main parties in Puerto Rico are the Popular Democrat Party and the New Progressive Party. They account for about 90% of the population. The Popular Democrat Party is described as center-left, but in 2016, and during the election, their platform stated that their party, quote, seeks to be an instrument of social justice and change. Sounds terrible.
Oh, so centrist. Oh, very centrist. Oh. Maybe centrist in Europe.
Sounds more progressive than progressive. Yeah. This is the party that San Juan Mayor Carmen
Yulín.
What? Yulín? Carmen Yulín, who we'll be talking about later, belongs to.
Yeah, she was one of the she's the mayor of San Juan, and she's a big major player in the most recent natural disasters. She did a lot of mean words to Trump and the Trump administration during those crises, and we'll kind of see why that was unwarranted, because she was just not doing her job, as it turns out, and it wasn't Trump's fault.
So, CC, whether or not someone or a organization is a leech depends on a few factors. I think that we offered them a bunch of money to stay, and they accepted it. Does that make them a leech? we were the ones dumb to make the deal, right?
Well, and there's some other stuff that I didn't get into, but they are a very strategic port still, and they're very strategic militarily.
Yes, extremely.
It's really like the prime. If you kind of look at it in the world, it's one of the most prime launching points for us to have a military base for naval and the Air Force. It's a really good staging point if we ever needed to do anything that was east of there, maybe
it's
south of there.
We're paying for a service, right? So Qatar pays us to have a military base in Qatar, right? So are we leeching off of them? So like we're buying basically the fact to have the ability to have influence by having this protectorate. So I mean, obviously, when we get into the more detail about the actual government leaders, those people are leeches. But just because we offer them a bunch of money in return for services doesn't necessarily mean that the country is a leech.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think there's a lot of reasons to keep it, but there's also a lot of reasons why the leaders that the leaders that are controlling it are very annoying. Either way, we'll get into that more. We're almost done with this kind of brief history lesson. So we also Dyer just went over the Popular Democrat Party. Which again they're supposedly described as center left, but in their platform they say that we're going to be an instrument of social justice and change. Like, where have we heard that before? And then the other party is the New Progressive Party, which is sort of defined as a mix between Democrat and Republican views, but their 2016 election platform. It had a suspicious amount of focus on the amount of extra federal funding they could get if statehood was achieved. That's one of this party's big platforms, is they really want to be a state. but they have this really big focus on how much extra federal funds they could get access to if they became a state. The party has also been plagued with dozens of corruption scandals over the past 30 years. This culminated last August when party member and governor Ricardo Rosello stepped down over a scandal where he was making jokes about hurricane victims in his country. The FBI also last year arrested several of Rosello's cabinet officials in connection to misuse of $15.5 million of aid from the U.S. Oh, that's weird, because one of the things we're going to talk about is Puerto Rico claimed the U.S. wasn't very helpful during the natural disasters. It turns out we were. It just people were mismanaging the money, and as we'll find out in a little bit here, mismanaging the supplies as well. So there we have it. The party of social justice and the party of corruption sounds like a recipe for success. I love it. I think that they're going to do great.
Yeah. Okay, so the next thing we're going to get into is the current situation with what's going on in Puerto Rico, and the current drama that has been in the headlines recently.
Oh, it's my part. I had a lot of parts in a row here. It's not fair. All right, so our current situation is so that's sorted the history of Puerto Rico, which brings us to the present situation in that little island territory of the U.S. Unfortunately, this is a story just as corrupt and dysfunctional as the rest of its history. Oh no, I thought after finding out that they were run by a bunch of corrupt people and SJWs that was going to be, I thought it was all going to be sunshine and rainbows. Oh no.
So the drama about Puerto Rico stems from the recent drama, Hurricane Maria, that hit Puerto Rico in 2017. You could even say that the story started way back, decades back, when Puerto Rico's government never invested money into their infrastructure to make it better and more capable of surviving a hurricane. You could say that. You could also say that that the story goes back to when Trump was first elected, because that's what has tainted the media's view of all this recent circumstance with Puerto Rico since.
I mean, that makes sense, actually. I mean, most people don't. I know we just did a whole history on it, but what most people don't know is that Puerto Rico did not exist prior to the Trump administration, and that there was no such thing as hurricanes or earthquakes prior to the Trump administration. Right. So, I mean, it kind of makes sense.
Yeah, so when Trump got into office, the media was looking for any excuse to attack him, and they were hoping for him to fail. So they were, anything that he did, even sending aid to Puerto Rico after a hurricane, they were going to, of course, do the orange mad and bad story, right? Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's just the bias from which they were viewing any response from Trump. So that is misplaced. Move on.
Oh, okay. When Hurricane Maria made landfall, it caused billions in damage. A lot of people were killed. Public services were almost completely destroyed. The damage was made far worse because of a failure of local government leaders, which resulted in a massive humanitarian disaster as well. Initially, it took 6 days after the storm for assistance to be sent to Puerto Rico. The media claimed that this was a failure of Trump, who had provided similar relief to Texas far faster. I wonder if it could have anything to do with Texas being literally connected to the continental United States. Do you think?
Yes.
Do you think it has something to do with it?
Also, Texas's infrastructure was far more well maintained and far sturdier and able to take the weather that it dealt with. Also, the storm was bigger in Puerto Rico, and it's, like I said, it's so freaking far away. It takes longer and is harder to get the stuff there. Just starting off, before we get into the actual issues that caused most of the problem, just logistically, it will take longer to get stuff there. And also, a report by NPR and PBS concluded after the hurricane relief had been started that one of the big reasons why the services for Puerto Rico failed so catastrophically was because they had, first off, that Puerto Rico was in a lot of debt, so they weren't spending money on maintaining their infrastructure, and the infrastructure was so in such bad disrepair that it was damaged more easily by the storm. They hadn't updated it in decades. So the truth was that Puerto Rico was very slow to request and slow to accept assistance from the federal government. The emergency managers, if they had any for Puerto Rico, were unable to coordinate the acceptance of aid. So, obviously the U.S. government, being as they have autonomy, can't just go in there and start deciding things for them, right?
And we also can't just drop crates with parachutes into the middle of wherever we decided. Like, there has to be some kind of supply chain, and we can't just arbitrate those decisions. We expect that there's somebody on the ground who knows, okay, this is where our community center is, like, this would be a good place to put it. Like, we don't know that. I mean, other than, again, let's just pack up crates and drop them with parachutes and, like, hope for the best. Like, I think that's what they were expecting. But beyond doing that, we require some kind of coordination with people on the ground who are locals and know what areas need what and where the best place to store stuff's going to be at.
Yeah, there is a legal framework and an agreement between all the states for mutual support. And none of the states were allowed to send anything until they had someone in Puerto Rico saying to directing where to go, where it should go, and where it should be stored and how it should be delivered. That is a responsibility that is held by the state that is receiving the aid. Because you can't just drop a bunch of resources off anywhere because it won't go to anybody that needs it. You require someone to accept it.
Yeah.
Right. So because Puerto Rico failed to respond to the states and the U.S. government, federal government, saying, "Hey, we got stuff to send you. Who's going to coordinate it?" Because it took some 6 days, that's why it was delayed. In fact, one of the very first bits of aid that was sent to Puerto Rico was from, I believe it was from Texas. A person who was experienced in coordinating aid was sent there as the first bit of aid to then coordinate their aid because they didn't know how to. So a person, they donated somebody from another state to go help. That was the first bit of aid. So in the end, though, Trump sent aid, equipment, machinery, food, medicine, the Army Corps of Engineers, sent all that to help. In total, the Congress had allocated $43 billion in aid for Puerto Rico, but only about $14 billion was sent for reasons we'll be explaining in a moment.
If I'm not mistaken, I think I remember at the time hearing stories of some perishable supplies going bad.
Reading.
What's that?
Oh, yeah, okay, it's going bad, but we'll get into why later.
Oh, okay. Well, no, but there was like perishable supplies that we were planning on sending, but because of such a long delay, almost a week. I mean, there's very few things that you can buy that are perishable food items that will last for 6 days, without like some kind of intensive refrigeration or something like that. But yeah, we had stuff ready to go, and it was just going bad, sitting there in the dock waiting to get shipped. And I know that was a bit of a crisis as well, because once they were ready for the aid, we had to rotate some of it because it was going bad. We had to pull it back off of the ships and put the new stuff on, which was like another nightmare for us. We're trying to be helpful. Let's see here. So they also had, we had food, medicine, construction materials, and workers ready to get poured into Puerto Rico. But for some reason, the recovery was still very, very slow, and the aid did not seem to be getting to the people that needed it. For some reason, despite a great deal of construction materials and equipment being shipped to the island, the workers were sitting idle, lacking the materials to rebuild the destroyed infrastructure. The media blamed Trump for the very slow and messy recovery that was resulting in a great deal of human suffering. And you know what? To be honest, if Trump had actually gone down there himself, I guarantee you he could have gotten all those building sites whipped up into shape. I mean, that's literally what he's specialized in, is building things on a massive scale. So he's not like, as the president, he's not down there coordinating these construction projects. So like to say that it's his fault that 7, 8, 20 people down the chain that are from him that are responsible for actually like rebuilding these sites, that it's now this is on Trump's lap, it's his fault. He doesn't have control over that. But if he did have direct control over these construction projects, you can guarantee you they would have been done ahead of time and below budget.
So I know somebody who actually went to Puerto Rico and was part of the team that was supposed to be putting up the rebuilding the electric grid, basically putting up power lines, right? And he spent his trip there, most of it sitting in his car doing nothing, like on the road where they dug the holes to put in the new power lines, and it's because the people who were responsible in the Puerto Rican government for delivering all the materials to put up the power lines were not delivering it. So they basically had all the Army Corps of Engineers sitting idle, doing nothing because they were not distributing the materials that were sitting at airports and sitting in warehouses, ready to be used, but they weren't distributing them.
Yeah, Krieg was telling us offline. You guys remember Krieg being on the show a few weeks ago? He also had a buddy that was in the Army Corps that was down there, or maybe the National Guard, but they were down there in Puerto Rico for two of the hurricanes. The first one in 2017, the one was it last year that happened. He went down there for both of them, and he flew into the same airport, and there was a big pile of supply crates that were sitting untouched when he left 2 years earlier, and when he came back the next year, they were still just sitting there. Just nothing was getting moved around, nothing was getting done. Nobody was using what they needed to use. It was just everything was just sitting right where it was. And he gave a very similar account of, he was sent there with a job to do. There were supposedly things for him to do, but he sat idle a lot of the time because all the projects he was supposed to be working on, nobody was ready for him to work on them.
Yep. So as you probably already know, the blame was misplaced when they accused Trump of being guilty for the Puerto Rican government not coordinating their own rebuilding efforts. The first clue was seen a few months into the non-recovery. Pictures and videos surfaced of hundreds of thousands of water bottles being found sitting on the tarmac in crates at a Puerto Rican airport, just not being distributed, not being used, and those water bottles had been sitting there for months in the heat in the plastic bottles. Also, they found warehouses later on that had the badly needed disaster relief materials, food, medicine, and construction materials, the stuff that the people needed badly, just sitting in warehouses, collecting dust, not being distributed. It became painfully obvious that not only was the recovery being poorly managed, but the government officials of Puerto Rico who were managing the recovery were intentionally withholding food, clean water, medicine, and medicine from their people as they died. Only 64 Puerto Ricans died in the actual hurricane, but a total of 3,057 died in the aftermath.
And as we just talked about when we were going over the history segment, when we were talking about the parties, the governor at the time, the FBI came in and arrested people in his cabinet. I mean, we sent
It's in the story.
Oh, okay.
Also, I want to point out that during this period, during that right after the hurricane, the first one, the governor was actually calling out Trump and saying that he was giving insufficient support, even though he was at the same time he knew he had all the materials he wasn't distributing, and it seems like he was letting people die to get a political victory against the president.
Well, very democratic of him. Let's see here. So Trump was facing false blame after this disaster relief. He was not shy in calling out the people that were actually responsible, and that's one of the things that we get with Trump. A lot of people don't like it. A lot of people say he's boorish and he's brash and he's all this stuff, and he's rude. Except for the fact that he actually calls out the crap when he sees it. A lot of people don't like that. And this is one of those. This is one of those instances where Obama probably would have rolled over, although they probably wouldn't have done this to Obama, and the media probably would have been a lot more supportive. But if things are happening that people are just playing politics and it's affecting people's lives, it's causing real issues. Trump is not afraid to call that out, and that's one of the things the media do not like about him. Let's see here. So Trump tweeted on April 1st, 2019, quote, "The Democrats today killed a bill that would have provided great relief to farmers and yet more money to Puerto Rico, despite the fact that Puerto Rico has already been scheduled to receive more hurricane relief funding than any other place in history. The people of Puerto Rico are great, but the politicians are corrupt and incompetent. Puerto Rico got far more money than Texas and Florida combined, yet their government can't do anything right. The place is a mess. Nothing works. FEMA and the military worked emergency miracles, but politicians like the crazed, incompetent mayor of San Juan have done such a poor job of bringing the island back to health. $91 billion to Puerto Rico, and now the Dems want to give them more, taking dollars away from our farmers and so many others. Disgraceful." Yeah, that's exactly it. He starts it off. It's not the people. The people are great. He knows that. It's the politicians. And the media will spin that. The politicians will spin that and be like, he's attacking the people of Puerto Rico. No, he specifically said, not the people, you the politicians. It's you. And they're like, do you mean the people? They're like, no, you the politicians. Let's see here. Yeah, so that's, and he's right. It's completely disgraceful that they did that. And the Democrats love just sending your money wherever they want. It doesn't matter as long as you don't get it. It's when we get into more of the open forum discussion here, I'll be talking a lot about my views of that and how much money we're giving off to them. And as we know, Trump's no big fan of sending away truckloads, plane loads full of money off to foreign countries for aid. And I'm not a fan of that either. I do. My heart hurts for some of the humanitarian crises out there. But if you're going to get that money, you're going to not do anything with it. And then you're going to come back to America and say, oh, you guys are awful. Trump's being rude to us. And hey, also give us more money. Nah, you don't get any more after that. We got to cut you off. We can't encourage that.
I believe Trump has reduced our aid to other countries by 21%. I think the fact there was, but he's reduced it a lot.
Wait, I thought that Ukraine was the only country that he was reducing aid to.
No, he's reduced aid to countries in general across the board.
But
it's
Schiff
part
said
of
that
the thing he ran on.
But Schiff said that it was unprecedented that Trump would just single out a single country, Ukraine, to reduce aid to.
Okay, so it's odd for him to say that because Trump has cut aid across the board, but also Obama cut aid to at least 8 different countries that I can think of, and 1 billion of it was over 1 billion was Ukraine. He was withholding aid to Ukraine to the tune of 1 billion. So it's not really unprecedented since Obama did it before Trump, and then Trump's been doing it to a lot of countries. So I guess the short answer is what Schiff said was completely false.
Are you implying that Schiff's a liar?
That or he's an idiot. Either one. Pick one.
Yes.
But what he said wasn't true historically. So, anyways, the left-wing media responded to Trump's accusations based on publicly available evidence of corruption and mismanagement by calling him racist. So, by the way, I was going to point out when the left-wing media called Trump racist for his tweet in April 2019, there was already publicly available evidence that they had warehouses of stuff sitting there not being distributed. There was already videos and pictures of crates and of water sitting on the tarmac just aging. There was already investigations by the FBI in July that came out in the end of the investigation was in July. So they already had done most of the investigation. NPR and PBS had already investigated and come to the conclusion that the Puerto Rican government was mismanaging their funds prior to the hurricane, and that resulted in the damage during the hurricane. All this evidence was already out there, the evidence of corruption and mismanagement. So Trump is just simply saying what is publicly available. And the mainstream media's response to that was to call him racist. Obviously, they can't talk about reality, so they have to impugn his character. If the liberal media really cared about minority groups like Puerto Ricans, they would investigate and hold the government officials accountable that were literally killing them. Instead, the liberal elites saw their corpses as a political opportunity to continue their orange man bad narrative. Charles Blow, writing for the New York Times, wrote he described Trump's tweets as being lie-filled rage tweets. But what was in his tweets, they may have been raging against the government who was literally killing their people. I think that's justified rage, but not one word in Trump's tweets, which often do have, they do often do exaggerate things. But in this case, not a single word of those tweets was false. Some of them are opinion, but not false. Sarah Jones, writing for the New York magazine Intelligencer, accused Trump's tweets of having undertones. Did I pronounce it correctly? Intelligencer? Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, sure. Trump's tweets as having undertones of the stereotypes of poor people of color as moochers, takers, and welfare queens, which is odd because Trump praised the Puerto Rican people as being great and only criticized the government. So I guess that stereotype is only existing in Sarah Jones's mind.
Yeah. Yeah, you kind of gave away the game there. More power to NPR. As boring as they are, they actually did a real investigation into this, and I remember that there was a time when some of these other mainstream outlets would do investigations into this, and I can't imagine the benefit to literally saving lives had somebody with the backing, like, and the popularity of like the New York Times or CNN or ABC. Maybe ABC could if they had so much extra time because they weren't talking about oh god, what the hell's his name? Oh god, how can I forget that guy's name? The rape. Oh, Epstein. Yeah, there we go. Wow, that was bad. It's getting late, guys. The ABC is hiding their Epstein stories, so they have plenty of time in the slate to do an investigation into Puerto Rico and talk about that. But nobody was interested in doing that. They only wanted to talk about why is this Trump bad? Why is Trump bad? They aren't interested in actually helping out anybody. And despite all the accusations that Trump had lied and that he was a racist, as it turns out, that Trump was right. On the 11th of July, 2019, the FBI charged 6 members of the Puerto Rican government, including a member of FEMA, with 32 counts of indictment, accusing the defendants of charges including wire fraud, theft, and money laundering. The head prosecutor for Puerto Rico said that these government officials gave lucrative government contracts to friends who lacked the ability to perform disaster relief, as was evident by their inability to perform the disaster relief. She said that, quote, "At the cost of our suffering, they took advantage of the most vulnerable moments the people of Puerto Rico were living through to enrich themselves." Criminal.
This brings us back to the question of why did Ben Carson, the head of Trump's administration's HUD office, willfully withhold 2/3 of the $23 billion that Congress had originally allocated to Puerto Rico's disaster relief. It was withheld for the same reason he gave in his April 2019 tweet, that they were in taking the money for themselves and mismanaging it. The same reason that the left-wing media said was a lie, but actually was true. They were stealing, embezzling the disaster relief money, and it wasn't going to actually help the people. It is the same reason why they called Trump racist. It's for the same reason that Trump withheld money from the Ukraine, because he thought that Ukraine was corrupt and wanted to make sure that they were not acting corruptly before he gave them money. They did not give the rest of the money that was slotted for Puerto Rico until they finished their investigation and jailed the FBI investigation and jailed the people who were literally stealing the money. Why would you give more money for them to steal if you knew they're just going to steal it? Right?
Yeah, and so the media really needs to, and the Democrats would really need to make the case that the FBI was basically invading Puerto Rico and stealing its lawfully elected citizens. Like, unless they're willing to make that case that the FBI illegally went after these 6 people, that there was no corruption, there was no reason to withhold the aid. Yeah, that's a pretty steep assumption there. But they don't want to make that case, and they aren't even going to pretend that that's a thing. Mainstream media won't even tell you about these 6 people that were taken out for corruption charges. They won't even bring that up, because if they did, you might realize, like, oh, hey, maybe that's why Trump wasn't giving him the aid. But they won't tell you about that. They'll just tell you that Trump wasn't giving him the aid, and then they'll tell you. They won't show you Trump's tweet, but they'll tell you about how Trump was tweeting about how he hated the brown people in Puerto Rico, and that's probably why he wasn't giving them aid. He wanted to see them die.
Yeah, they would love for it because he was racist somehow.
Yep. So you want to watch that video of the absolute latest this week coverage, and we'll talk about it.
Sure.
Okay. So we had, you guys probably seen this on Twitter or wherever your social media is. We had this week there was some, as we talked about, there was a lot of reports of warehouses full of aid that was just sitting there, not being used, not being distributed. And this week they found a lot more of them after the most recent earthquake, and some of these warehouses are dating back to the 2017 hurricane. And they were just kind of like lost warehouses. But somebody went through and found them, and then now they're finding a lot more of them. And there's a lot of there's kind of renewed outrage at the corruption of the Puerto Rican government this week. So let's see here, NBC, they did a really nice kind of summary of that. So we'll go through that real quick, and then we'll talk about it.
Bar, they cranked open the warehouse, then applause raining down from an infuriated crowd. Tonight, thousands of Puerto Ricans suffering from the aftermath of powerful earthquakes just discovered there's an entire warehouse full of items donated following the wrath of Hurricane Maria. The cache of goods, located just miles from the epicenter of the latest quake on Puerto Rico's southwest coast, has been sitting there for nearly a year.
Meeting.
Diapers, baby food, sanitary wipes, bottles, and pacifiers.
Meeting.
Outside the complex, a desperate crowd cannot understand how all this help could be right in their backyard the whole time.
It's like, how can this be happening?
Rafael Gonzalez's group, Profesa, collected supplies to help Hurricane Maria victims and is now doing the same for those devastated by the earthquakes.
What is the human impact of this mistake?
We saw it on Maria. We saw what happens when you don't deliver the supplies that people need. People die.
Puerto Rico's Secretary of State saying this ruins our credibility and the humanitarian effort. The governor fired several top officials, including the director of emergency management, within the last 24 hours, and tonight vows to hold others accountable. But the ensuing investigation of little solace to those suffering, and now a puzzling oversight in the middle of a disaster zone. Sam Brock, NBC News.
Hey, NBC.
Yeah. So, yeah, they're finding all this stuff. What's that?
It's a great video.
Yeah. Yeah. So a lot of this kind of got dredged back up this week, and I had a lot of thoughts on it, and it was mostly very pissed. They were so brutal. The Puerto Rican politicians were saying such nasty things, and the media was helping them out. But it was the elected officials in Puerto Rico that were, they were kind of the origin of that. If they had been polite about everything during these last 2 years, then I don't think the media would have had much fodder to pick up on. But they were so much vitriol and hatred towards the Trump administration, saying, oh, he just hates us, and trying to call out to the world, trying to point out, like, oh, hey, we got this big orange man, he's oppressing us and he hates us, and it's because we're brown. And just sitting there flailing and saying all these things. It's so nasty to the American people. And meanwhile, we're doing our damnedest to try and send them stuff. We're trying so hard. The American people have such an infinite capacity for generosity. I mean, the what we were saying earlier was it wasn't just FEMA and federal government support that was getting blocked. There was states, like individual states, like independent of the federal government, were also trying to send aid. I know there's a lot of reports of nonprofits that are having just a hell of a time getting anything done or getting anything shipped over there because there was nowhere to put it. There was nobody doing anything. And when you did on the rare occasions find somebody in the Puerto Rican government that was willing to coordinate with you to have it put someplace, to set up some way of distributing it out, it would just, those supplies, they would just disappear into these warehouses and they would never get distributed. And so it really pisses me off that they do that. And I feel bad for the people, but at the same time, I can't help but think, they have a democracy. They have a democracy now, and they're electing these people. You don't just, everybody wants to pass the buck. The corrupt Puerto Rican politicians, they want to pass the buck to Trump, and Trump's passing the buck back to them, and all this stuff. But at the end of the day, it's the same issue you've got in America. We have corrupt politicians here and there, well, pretty much everywhere now. But it's what we vote for. It's what we vote for. People know, and that's what they're voting for. And Puerto Rico, it's a huge tragedy that 3,000 people died, but they died at the hands of the people they voted to lead for them. What would they have us do? What would they have us do other than just rolling in there, invading, flipping their whole government, and taking direct control over it again? That was the only solution here. If they didn't want to die, we could have saved 3,000 people had Trump said, okay, we're invading Puerto Rico, we're deposing their government, and we're going to take direct control and get this situation figured out. That would have saved people. That would have actually saved lives. I don't think anyone would have liked that, but people would be alive today because that had happened, if that had happened. But beyond that, what are we supposed to do? We've got Puerto Ricans voting for this crap. They're voting for these politicians. They're voting for social justice parties at the same time that they're dying in earthquakes and hurricanes, and none of their SJW politicians are helping them out. What would they have us do?
I think that the money we send to them and all this aid is all on agreements that we have agreed to because of them being, a commonwealth for us, right? Mm-hmm. So if we want to stop giving all this aid, which, by the way, a large portion of the aid we give goes straight to funding their corruption, right? And that's just, it always has been that way. It's been that way since their inception, right? I'd probably at the point where they started electing their own governors and that point forward, right?
Yeah.
So that is a built-in cost, us funding their corruption, of them remaining a protectorate of the U.S. So if you're frustrated with the money we're sending, and I would not blame you, I think the only way to resolve that is for them to no longer be part of the U.S. or for them to become a state.
And so it's not even necessarily about the money. It's about the so one of the ways I described to you earlier this week was I'm out of empathy. So there's a lot of things in the world. There's a lot of things wrong in the world. There's a lot of tragedies, and you guys, if everybody were to just think about every tragedy all the time and feel it fully all the time, you would never leave the house. It's not a thing that you're capable of doing. Everybody has you've got a certain budget for how much empathy you can have. And I think there's a lot of stuff going on in the States where there's people that need help. I'm thinking especially in California, there's some stuff that properly managed money could figure out. There's a lot of other places in the world that properly managed money could figure out. Heck, there's our debt that our 100 years from now children are going to be, well, maybe not that long, maybe only 20 years. Maybe we could be pouring some of that money into that debt and kind of fixing some of those problems we're facing now. But instead, we're spending it on this idea of having this empathy for for the Puerto Rican people, but they're electing people that hate us. They are they're electing people that hate us, that are oppressing them. As we went through their history, one of the first things that they did when we granted them legislative independence was to vote to oppress the minority party. I mean, this happens so often with nations like this that were, whatever happened throughout history that caused them to get to the point where we were controlling them, we always try to gift them back a democracy. As sometimes we go and try and purposefully topple them so they can give them a democracy. We haven't done that for a while, but we do try to be good stewards of the territories that we were controlling. We try to give them these gifts. And they throw it back in our face. They use it to elect people that are going to oppress them, and they hate us for it. They use it to elect people that hate us, and then they hate us even more for it. And then, we've got, again, this aid. So, again, on this idea of empathy is, I think that there's a lot better places that we could be spending our aid money. Just some places that it's worthwhile. People that are grateful. People that aren't going to throw it back in our face and hate us because we're giving them money. And there's a lot of places that we could be sending that money here at home. As was said here, a couple of different places, it was very widely reported that we were sending a lot more money to them than we were even to our own states, to Texas and the other southern states during the hurricanes that equally devastated them. It's just you've only got so much capacity for feeling these things. And if you're spending that time feeling it for somebody who hates you at every step of the way and throws your aid away or hides it in a warehouse
just to hurt you politically.
Yes, and then comes back at you and hates you even more for it and blames you for that, I think that there's better places to spend that. And I think I think it's sad because we have the ability. They're so close location wise. Geographically they're very close as compared to some of these other countries where there's there's terrible things happening all over the world. Why Puerto Rico? Why not the Congo or something like that? Why not someplace way off over there? Well, it's because they're close by, and we've got a close relationship with them over the last 100 years from owning them basically. But if they're gonna just be like that about it, just hate us for helping them out, I think that there's places that we could spend that time and money to help out people that don't hate us. Again, and including our own people and servicing the debt.
Yeah, so I think a solution would be to make them a state, because then they'd have to pay taxes. They'd actually have skin in the game, and they would also be held, to all the same laws that every state's responsible, and they'd have to have the mutual support agreement where when another state is in need, they'd have to provide financial and labor help with their disasters. It'd be a more equal agreement, at least, right?
One of the
oversight
issues,
too.
Yeah, one of the issues with that, just from I know I just spent a bunch of time talking about empathy and stuff like that, but there is a bit of a political play here too, and that is their statehood would likely almost entirely benefit the Democrats. Their political parties, when you reapply them to U.S. politics, they come out pretty heavily Democratic and progressive. As we went through some of the descriptions of the parties, that would be, it would give a lot of power to the Democrats, and that's one of the reasons why the Democrats are interested in their statehood. Is it would give them a lot of extra voters, and I don't necessarily think that that's a solution either.
It'd be a what was it? One in the Senate and one in the House.
Everybody gets two senators.
Oh, two. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you get everybody gets two senators and at least two members of the House.
Yeah.
So I think everybody gets at least three, because I think you start off with two, and then you have to break up your districts to at least have at least one more. So they would have two in the Senate and at least three in the House. But I don't know what their population is. It could be higher. I think I was hearing in 2012 that it could be as many as 5 in the House. But I'm not sure how that would work out. But it wouldn't. I don't know. It wouldn't necessarily work out in our favor. for the Republicans or for the conservatives. I don't think we necessarily need a entire state's worth of new progressive voters, but
yeah, they wouldn't want the statehood themselves anyways because they'd then have to pay all those taxes.
yeah.
But yeah, right now it's a pretty high bill for us to pay for what we're getting out of it. We might just be just locked into it as being we've always done it for so long that no one's gonna have the political will to do anything about it.
Yeah, it'd be essentially be like pulling in another California worth of corruption as well too. I mean, it would be. I mean, unless when they become a state, we're just gonna flip their whole government. I'd imagine that their current government would just turn into state houses and state legislatures.
A lot of them would get arrested for under U.S. law for what they're doing. Yeah. Some of them already are, but yeah, they have more leeway now.
Yeah, I mean, other than becoming a state, what's your thoughts on continuing the aid? I think that the Puerto Rican people, I think that they have some culpability in this. I think that they've got a little bit of responsibility they need to take. Again, you're a democracy. That's one of the things that you don't have to worry about under despotism. Is it's not necessarily your fault. But when you got a democracy, guess what? You got to take a little responsibility for the people you elect, and they're en masse electing. Same thing with California. They're electing these awful politicians that are just destroying their localities, and then these people who vote for these politicians, after their cities get destroyed, they look to the rest of the country, they look to the conservatives, and say, why are you hurting us? It's like we're not. You got to take a little responsibility for the people that you vote for. And I'm not wishing death on anybody, but I think that the Puerto Rican people need to learn some lessons from this, and certainly have those lessons.
Yeah,
color
part of the problem
voting.
is the politicians and the people live in a situation where they have the sugar daddy that's giving them lots of money. That's the U.S., right?
Yep.
And they're not having to give up anything. They have no skin in the game. They don't have to pay up taxes. And the tax money that they're voting on how it should be, used isn't their tax money. It's some other people in the U.S. mainland. So maybe one way to deal with the perspective these people have is as if they were having to pay taxes, even if they weren't a state.
CC, I think you're not listening to me. I'm saying democracy. I've been talking about Puerto Rico, and to the effect that we are a republic, yes, we are, but I'm talking about elections. We vote democratically. That's a democracy. that's a democratic vote. Yes, I know that we are a republic, but we're talking about Puerto Rico, and we gifted them the gift of democracy.
They do not have a republic in the island of Puerto Rico.
Yes. I appreciate you calling me out for that, though. Everybody needs a civics lesson every now and then.
Hey, like the energy there.
Yes.
The one governmental body is a republic.
Well, yeah, we organize power in a republic. We vote democratically, but it is to say that when I'm talking about electing politicians, we elect them democratically. That's what I mean by democracy. We weren't talking about how they're organizing their government. I specifically have been referring over and over again, which I think I made clear. I'm talking about we gifted democracy, the ability to vote for your elected representatives democratically, and that they should take some responsibility for their democratic vote to elect, Democrats. So that's what I'm talking about. We weren't talking about how the U.S. government was organized, but
nope.
Good job keeping us on our toes.
So I think I don't know what the legality would be with making them pay taxes, but I think that if you're growing up with that, or you're living in that kind of situation where everything's being given to you for free, you kind of are more likely to fall into the mindset of a Democrat.
Yeah. Well, the other thing too is that their budget wise, they are imploding right now.
So massive debt.
Yeah. So one of the other things that we would inherit, along with apparently 7 electoral votes going to the Democrats, we would also inherit quite a large deficit in debt. So one of the other things that's kind of goofy. Let me see if I can remember this, because I didn't research this part of the show, but it's something I used to know. Let me see if I can remember it real quick. There is something about the way the U.S. banks loan money to Puerto Rico, where the Puerto Rican government, normally in a state, if a state is borrowing money from a bank, the U.S. law allows the state to meet the needs, or like a city even. It allows the city to meet the needs of the people prior to servicing that debt, which is a big deal. So if your state's running out of money, like say California, you are allowed to spend money on the people and on the services prior to servicing the debt. That's just a law, and the banks know that going into it when they loan money to municipalities and to states. With Puerto Rico, there was a deal set up, and this, the U.S. interest. I don't want to say the U.S. has like zero impact on the corruption. We certainly have financed it, government wise, but we've also we've had some predatory corporations and lending that have also done that as well. There was the way that banks loan money to Puerto Rico is a little bit different than what I just described. Puerto Rico is under an obligation to service their debt prior to going through any civil services. So one of the issues that they're having is they're bumping up against that edge where they don't have enough money to service their debt, and they're legally required to service that debt prior to spending money on civil services. Now, I think our aid money should go a little. That doesn't change the fact that they're unable to accept our aid money just because they're so corrupt, and that's something that to the extent
they'll accept it right out of their pocket.
Yeah, to the extent that we should be helping them out. I think that's an older law. I think it's like 60, 70 years old. I think that's something that should be looked into and revised. And realistically, if Puerto Rico were to tell JP Morgan to go screw themselves, hey, we're going to spend money on disaster relief, I really doubt that JP Morgan Chase would have a successful case against them in U.S. courts. I think that they would have I think to the extent that they're under that policy, I don't think that's a good thing, but I also think it's unenforceable. I really don't think it's something that's going to really, any of the big banks, maybe 70 years ago they could have called in on that, but I don't think that they're going to be able to call in on that in modern times. I just don't think that's going to fly. So, but that is an issue that they have, and so because of that, they are much more susceptible to a debt bubble and a debt collapse than we are, our state is, and so at some point, that's going to become a pretty big issue, and they're going to default really hard on those loans. And at that point, they may just not have a choice but to become a state, because otherwise they really don't have anybody else. They don't have any centralized bank to borrow from. We would be, the U.S. would really be their lender of last resort. And I don't know what would happen to them. I guess JP Morgan Chase would just own an island at some point, but more likely they would, their economy would collapse, and we would have to pull them in as a state. That would be the only solution for that.
Yeah, that would suck.
Or it could just be, JP Morgan Chase's stand. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. Or maybe, here's a crazy idea. Maybe they'll elect somebody who will actually lead their little protectorate properly and pay back all their debts. No.
That's funny. So how would we elect, other than the president, how would we elect somebody in a Republican election? That's not a way that you elect people.
I guess you elect them republicly.
I mean, we do for the presidency, but we don't call it that. But I don't like everything else that we vote for and everything that they're voting for in Puerto Rico, which is what we're talking about. They don't vote for it republicly.
That's a weird way to say that.
All right. Yeah. So I don't know. I guess. What do you guys think? I toss it back to you guys to kind of think through it. The Trump administration obviously has been really rethinking and clamping down on foreign aid. Again, Puerto Rico is not the only place that we give a lot of money to that hates us. In fact, almost every place that we give money to hates us. So, to the extent that we're doing that, maybe we should start pulling back on that. We also...
We're in debt, and we have our own people to take care of. All right? We can stop sending money to all these other countries. We need to take care of ourselves first.
Yep. So, and, nobody's wishing for anybody to die, especially in mass disasters, natural disasters. But that's happening all over the world every day, and it's why this is one of the things the Democrats do is that they live really by emotion. So when they're seeing somebody, they're seeing a group, like, oh, okay, well that's the most important thing right now is this person I'm seeing right now. We gotta take out all the billionaires so we can help this one person, and they're not thinking about the everybody else that's having issues in other states or flyover country or even other countries. It's very much an emotional reaction to say, okay, well, Puerto Rico's so close to us, we should really be taking care of them. But why Puerto Rico over any other place that's having the same issues? And it's from a emotional perspective, I understand it, but if we're going to be having logicked, reasoned policy for foreign policy, for foreign aid, we really need to be thinking through these things.
Yeah. So the funny thing is, the progressives in charge of Puerto Rico are they're saying they have the emotional position. Oh, Trump is so evil and racist. So because of that, I'm going to take actions to destroy this great evil of Trump, who's never, hasn't been, causing the death of his own people. I'm going to, deny aid to my own people and let them die. I'll sacrifice thousands of my own people just to get a political victory against Orange Man bad. I mean, the emotional, arguments what led them to, want to hurt Trump, but they don't have emotional response to all the people they're letting die. It's so strange. No,
and the media eats it up too. I mean, they're complacent in this whole thing.
Oh, defending them when there was already so much evidence against them. Yet, I don't think. I mean, they use emotional reasoning to convince the people, but the elites that are making these political moves, they're sacrificing the safety and lives of their own people. The people who are suddenly against the wall when that is one of the best tools we have for protecting our society. That would have prevented crime, would have prevented deaths. Those people will change their minds. They're not being ruled by emotional reasoning. They're using emotional reasoning as a tool to convince the voters. But they themselves are, calculating evil individuals.
Yep.
Who are sacrificing on a regular basis the safety and security of their own voters, their own people, just to win political points. So I think we've exhausted this particular topic. We have talked about it before, but it's nice to kind of go over it in a little more detail. You want to do some games?
Yeah, we can do
or do you
games.
Want to?
Games.
Not a lot though, because I do have to go to bed eventually.
It's gotta make bread. Yeah, we can do it. We can do games. I will. What game do you want to play?
Who's on? So we have someone for speedrunner.
I don't know. If we play Quiplash, will you guys play Quiplash? Or are you guys just gonna watch us? You guys do that sometimes. Nobody wants to play Quiplash.
Some people just like to watch,
Yeah. Dyer likes to do. All right, we'll do a quick break here. We'll be back in about 5 minutes, and we'll get some Quiplash going. But thank you guys for joining us.
Okay. See you later. Direwolf out.
All right. She's signing off for